Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. Week 2 is now officially in the books. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, and I've got Dynasty Dale with me today. Find him over on Twitter at Dynasty_Dale, and we are excited for another episode. And I did tell you guys last week that we're going to be moving this to Tuesday night to start recording because Friday is kind of pointless because you don't get to touch on all the games and everything. So we are excited to jump into it here Tuesday night. We're going to be talking about some of our sleeper starts for this upcoming week, recapping our guys from last week that we recommended and where it went wrong, and then recapping week number 2 in the ERI league and a couple of trades that went down in that league. So, and we also got a little bit of draft strategy around Trey Lance. What are you going to do with him? And we're going to tell you. So thank you guys for joining. Dale, how you doing today?
Hey. I'm doing great tonight. I'm doing great tonight, Calvin. I am very excited to have 2 weeks in the NFL season, and I'm definitely ready to talk about some starts for week.
Awesome. Did you do good in your leagues this week?
I didn't do too bad. I actually had an upset win, which I was pretty happy about because of Tua going off. So I was very, very happy about it.
You dirty man, starting to dude, it was a terrible week for me. I won 1 out of 8, including my redrafts. I went 1 in 7 this week. It was a rough week. Freaking Paris Campbell and DJ Chark everywhere killed me. The only league I won is the league I didn't start either one of those. It's just disappointing. Disappointing. Oh, and then you throw in Cole Kmet and Hunter Henry also goosing me. I had like so many players just get goose eggs. It's crazy. Cole Kmet has 0 points through 2 weeks. What are we doing now? What are we doing? All right, so let's quickly just recap our starts of the week from last week. My starters last week, I'm going to talk about them, where it went wrong with a couple of them. I recommended Allen Robinson. That was a good start, in my opinion. He was so close, inches away from having a second touchdown. If you heard about the play, basically he had a touchdown. They ran the routes, had a touchdown, and then after the play was over and everybody was celebrating, one of the referees called out that there was a player that had concussion symptoms, so they canceled the play after it was over and redid the play and pulled that player for the concussion. And then the next play, Cooper Kupp got the touchdown instead of Allen Robinson. So he was almost a smash play, but he only was pretty good this week. And I think that that's going to continue. Again, this is what I was kind of expecting from Allen Robinson. Squeaky wheel. Everybody kind of expected it. And yeah, that's it's something that I would be liking going forward if it was me. What was your first guy that you had last week?
Mine was Curtis Samuel. He was definitely a hit. Like he was 7 for 9, 78 yards in a TD, and he also had about like 20 rushing yards on a very, very good Commanders offense, which I'm loving this year, which doesn't feel right to say, but I am definitely loving their offense.
Hey,
And
you just got to remember, it was all Carson Wentz's fault in Indianapolis. That's just all we got to remember.
What 100% it was.
But no, Curtis Samuel, talk him up. You got him right. I wanted him. You stole him from me, but you get the credit. So, all right, go ahead.
Oh, all I was gonna say was that my second start was Greg Dort for the Arizona Cardinals. Like he went 4 for 4 for 55 and a touchdown, which is about 15 points. And then if you're in a real pinch for a sneaky start for the next couple weeks, like he's gonna be your guy, definitely with Hollywood's injury, with Hopkins on the sideline. Like Ertz is always a liability for her.
That is true. Yeah, he's been surprisingly good, and I think he does have a little bit of risk when Hopkins comes back, but enjoy him while you got him. He definitely there's so many injuries right now or guys that are just so unreliable. Like if you have Darnell Mooney, I'd be pivoting to someone like Dortch 100%.
Absolutely.
All right, my second guy that I recommended last week was Michael Carter. He was a semi-hit, semi-miss. He ended up with 10 points, 7 carries for 23 yards, 5 receptions on 5 targets for 27 yards. The problem with Michael Carter this week was the efficiency just was not there. Breece Hall showed why he was a second-round pick. I'll give him credit. He was very explosive in this game. He finished with 3 points more, but he had the touchdown on the week. He broke a long run for a touchdown. But Michael Carter, like I keep saying, he had more carries, more opportunities than Breece Hall. And again, he's going to get worked up into it. But eventually it's going to be like a 50-50 split between these guys. And the Cleveland defense is a good defense. You know, they are very stout against the run. They have a very nasty defensive front. So the efficiency not being there, I'm not too worried about. It's the 5 for 5 that I love to see from Michael Carter. And again, when a lot of running back numbers were down on the week as a whole, I will take 10 points from Michael Carter. I'll still call it a miss for you guys because I want to be honest with it, but it's not too bad. And again, he's a sneaky start going forward because as much as I like Breece Hall, I do love Breece Hall. I know I've been talking down on Breece Hall for so long. The problem is it's just the volume is not going to be there for Breece Hall. He's got the explosiveness, but Michael Carter is going to have more volume than Breece most of the season. So utilize that while you can. My last guy, real quick, I'll touch on him and you can touch on yours, was DJ Chark. And this was a complete miss by me, but in my defense, Amon-Ra St. Brown was amazing, but the 0 for 4 for DJ Chark, he was 6 inches away from 2 touchdowns in this game. It was crazy. I was watching this game the whole time, and Jared Goff overthrew him or just put the ball in a bad spot. The first throw, he overthrew him by half a yard. DJ Chark ended up laying out, wasn't able to get it. It was in his fingertips, just wasn't able to pull it in. If he would have hit him in stride, though, more than likely it was a touchdown, but yeah, it just didn't work out there. Second one was kind of a weird throw. Like DJ Chark was completely wide open. He would have scored a touchdown if he would have gotten this ball, but Jared Goff threw it kind of low. Again, DJ Chark kind of had to dive to try and catch it. Again, didn't pull it in. That's not really his forte, is those diving spectacular catches, but man, he was so close from just having 2 touchdowns in this game, and 2 touchdowns, he would have been over 20 points. You would have been happy for sure. So I will count this again as a miss. I'll be honest with you guys, but man, it was so close to being a 3 for 3. Who was your last guy that you had this week?
So my last guy was Adam Thielen. Unfortunately, he was a miss as well. Like, he did play a little bit better, so he did have some more targets, but he's gonna be very, very TD dependent. You know, I mean, the game plan for the Vikings last night was in Thielen's favor, but Kirk Cousins was playing pretty poor last night, and they really couldn't move the ball at all on that Eagles defense. So, you know, I do expect some better days for Adam Thielen, but for last week, like, he was a miss.
Yeah, Adam Thielen, he is going to get some touchdowns as we go through the season, but that defense by the Eagles is just nasty. That is why we both had them, I think, winning number 1 seed in the NFC for a reason. This team is legit, guys. So just something to keep on your mind in the future weeks as you're playing against these defensive guys, you know, the Eagles defense. You're going to have to start modifying your matchups a little bit here. So just keep that on your mind. So that said, like I said, Dale beat me in week number 1. He had 2 hits, 1 miss. Very close to tying him and very close to beating him in this one, but I will give him the credit. So let's roll right into our 3 starters for this upcoming week. I'll jump off with my first guy here. And I guess this one's kind of cheating. I'll give it to you on that one. So the one guy I wanted to say here is basically a vote of confidence for this player, and that's going to be Kyle Pitts with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this shouldn't be a massive like, oh man, you're starting Kyle Pitts, go figure. No, but the reason why I wanted to mention him here is because a lot of people are freaking out about Kyle Pitts. Through 2 weeks, he is just not performing very well whatsoever for fantasy football, and the coach's comments have him a little bit more concerned as well. You know, he's the the tight end number 35 through 2 games, which you did not expect when you're taking him in the third round of your startups, right? Or your redraft leagues or wherever you took him. 10 targets, 4 catches. He had 7 in week 1, 3 last week, and 19 yards in both games. But here's the thing. Despite what Arthur Smith said, this isn't fantasy football. Squeaky wheel narrative. They're playing Seattle this week. Seattle's not a good team. The Seattle Seahawks got absolutely destroyed by the Denver tight ends in week 1. They're not a very good team in general. Seattle's just not great. They got destroyed by Ross Dwelley last week. So it's a very positive matchup for Kyle Pitts just on that front. Then you add in the fact that he's running all the routes on the field. He is playing all the snaps, 93% of snaps yesterday, just didn't get any targets. He had 3 targets on the week. What that says is they're just not game planning around Kyle Pitts. That's going to change in this week's practice. They're going to install the game plan around Kyle Pitts being the focus of the offense. He took him 4 overall. Arthur Smith is not an idiot. You know, he's cocky. We'll give him that, but he isn't an idiot. He's going to feature Kyle Pitts. And honestly, I think this is going to be a massive points for Kyle Pitts this week. I'm talking 20 to 30 points, what you expected from him when you drafted him. So I'm putting a stamp on him. I don't think he's just going to be good this week. I think he's going to be elite this week. So Kyle Pitts is my number 1 guy here. Who's your guy?
So my number 1 guy is Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am very, very excited about Kirk. I've always been a fan of Kirk, but he was in Arizona. He was a little inconsistent with Kyler Murray, but in this Jags offense, he is the wide receiver 1. He is the go-to target, I feel, for Lawrence, and I feel he's going and he's going against a Chargers defense who is good, and they are a lot better on the back end this year compared to in years past. But I do expect this to be a potentially higher scoring game, and I think the Jags are going to actually try to keep up with the Chargers, and it's going to be a really good game. And I think Christian Kirk is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. The one thing, too, about that as well, with Herbert having the injury, and Jacksonville's defense has been really good through 2 weeks. Like, just something to keep in mind. I know everyone's expecting the Chargers to just completely blow them out, but those 2 things combined might make this competitive. So I like that start from you. My number 2 guy is going to be Miles Sanders with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Miles Sanders, he's having a better year this year, but I think that he's going to have a great week this week. In week number 1, he had 18.5 points, 13 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown against Detroit. They're against Washington this week, and Washington has been getting absolutely destroyed on the ground. Their defense is just not what you'd really expect from them. I think their secondary is actually a little bit better than we've kind of seen the last couple weeks, but Washington is just getting absolutely massacred on a defensive front, and I like Miles Sanders. This Eagle team we just talked about, they are rolling, and I think that they are going to continue to roll as we go forward, and they're going to steamroll their division rivals in the Washington Commanders. And I think that Miles Sanders is probably going to go for over 100 on the ground, maybe a couple carries, but I'm expecting maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns in this game, as long as he doesn't get completely vultured by Jalen Hurts. But I think that what we've seen from Miles Sanders so far this year is he is looking really, really good. So stamp of approval here this week on Miles Sanders.
Well, on Sanders, I don't hate that start. I'm just not a big fan of Sanders's usage in. I mean, he is getting used, and he has been efficient. I do get that, but but like what you said with like Hurts around the goal line is almost a given 6 for him. So like I am worried about that, but like having 10 points, on you know for the rushing yards, and then he is able to catch the ball. I do see that as a potential hit on your end.
Yeah, we'll
So,
see. We will see.
so
You're right, Jalen Hurts. But I mean, the one nice thing for Sanders, even going back to last year, is the efficiency for him. You look at his games, he didn't play all of last year, but on Sleeper, the nice thing is you can see where their finishes were in terms of like green, yellow, and red in terms of how they ranked amongst all running backs or whatever category you're looking at for last year, right? His yards
right.
per carry is green in every game except for Wood for the last like 3 years. Like the dude is just very explosive. He's very
Yeah.
efficient. And again, I think that he had 17 carries this last week against Minnesota. I think that he's going to continue that. He's not going to have 30 opportunities, but I think he's going to have right around 15 carries, maybe 100 yards. And I just have a feeling that they're going to try and utilize him more in the red zone. One, to kind of take it off of Jalen Hurts a little bit to preserve him a little bit there, but also because last year he had no touchdowns. So they're going to try and feature him a little bit more. He is in a contract year, and the coaches aren't complete monsters. They're not trying to just completely screw Miles Sanders' career essentially by never letting him get a touchdown. So I think that's going to be this week, and I think he's going to have a good one. So who's your number 2 guy?
So my number two guy is actually on the other side of that game. It is Carson Wentz. Um,
Ooh.
I've been really liking him this year. He's been playing out of his mind. He got, let's see, in week one he had 27.72 points, and last week he had 27.78. So he's been very consistent. He has averaged at least like 313 and 3 a game, and you know, and that's a very, very good baseline to have if you're going to be like a high end QB1, which he has played this year. So like he's actually QB4 on the year. Um, the year's still young, and I think he's going to be playing with a lot of emotions this week. Like he's going to be going back to Philly for well they're actually playing at home. Excuse me. Um, but he's going to be playing against Philly. Like that's going to be definitely a a definitely a revenge game for him, and I think he's going to have. I believe he's going to have another good game. I don't expect him to have 27.7 points like he has been, but I do expect him to be, probably between 20 and 24 points, and a lot of those points are going to go to Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson.
We will see. It might be a Terry McLaurin week finally for
Yeah.
the first time this year, but yeah, no, Carson Wentz has been very good, and remember, it was all his fault in Indy
Hmm.
for the rest of the year. That's all I'm going to remind people. 24-0. It was all Carson Wentz's fault. But no, I do like
Hmm.
that start. It is a good one. Carson Wentz is looking pretty good so far this year. The only thing is he's been so efficient through the air. I don't know if that's going to continue every single week. I mean, it's been a couple weaker secondary so far.
Right.
But I will
Yeah.
say the weakest part of Philadelphia is their secondary. I think their defensive front seven are pretty monstrous, but back
Yes.
four, they're good, but they're not the best in the league good. So
Right.
if there's somewhere you could exploit them, I think it's there. So no, I do like that. We'll see how he finishes after this week. All right, then my last guy that I'm going to recommend is going to be Amari Cooper with the Cleveland Browns. And Amari Cooper, he did not have a great week one, but he really showed up last week. Old Amari Cooper is kind of what he looked like. Week one, he had 6 targets, 3 catches for 17 yards. It was just not great. But again, Carolina, I think their defense is actually pretty good. Their defense is not bad at all. Their offense just kind of stinks. It's all over the board. They just have no consistency whatsoever. Last week they played the Jets, and look at that. Amari Cooper playing 80% of the snaps yet again is pretty consistent week to week. 9 catches out of 10 targets for 101 and 1. And they're against Pittsburgh this upcoming week. No TJ Watt. I think Pittsburgh is a little bit more vulnerable right now on the defensive side of the ball. And Pittsburgh has been getting lit up through the air the last couple of weeks. Now, there's going to be a lot of emotions. These teams hate each other, like absolutely hate each other. So that'll be fun. But Amari Cooper is the new guy. He's never been part of this whole drama or anything like that. And I think that Brissett is starting to lean on him in this team. So I do like Amari Cooper quite a bit this year. Again, it's more of a full PPR kind of play. If you're in like standard, he was still pretty good last week, I'm not going to lie. But I do like Amari Cooper going forward, and I think that him and Brissett are starting to get a pretty decent rapport together. And this week, I don't think they're going to want to take the gas off like they did against the Jets last week, which led to a loss. So Amari Cooper is going to be my number 3 guy this week.
Good. No, I do agree with all those points. Like, so I think that Cooper has played really well this year for the Browns, and he's just going to keep going as he's starting to build that rapport with Brissett. So, so for my number 3 guy is actually a rookie this week. It's Garrett Wilson.
Oh, geez.
Of the New York of the New York Jets. I know I am a big Ohio State fan, and I have watched Garrett Wilson for the past 3 years when he was in college and this year, and I know the dude's legit. You know, I feel he's playing a very, very a fairly weak Bengals defense, and
Super
I think
Bowl hangover is real. That is for sure.
It is a big Super Bowl hangover for them. So like Joe Flacco is like, I think he's third in the NFL in yards this year, and with playing catch up against the Browns, he was mainly targeting Garrett Wilson. So like Wilson went 8. He had 8 receptions. He had 14 targets for 102 and 2. Now I don't expect the touchdowns to carry over by any means, but you know, like he's averaged 75 yards a game in 2 games, and he's averaged 6 receptions. So like right there is like a good baseline of about, you know, like 13 points. So, you know, like if you had some rushing yards here and there, like a catch or 2, you know, I think he's going to be a very big part of Jets' offense. And in this game, like I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Jets by the end of the year. I like Elijah Moore, but I believe the Jets have a lot more draft capital in Garrett Wilson than Elijah Moore, and Joe Flacco, and hopefully Zach Wilson builds a good rapport with Wilson over the years.
No, that's fair. We'll see how it goes. I think this might be a little bit of Elijah Moore. The only thing I'm scared about with the Jets is it might be a little bit of a ping pong situation here with the 2 guys, kind of like a Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But, you know, that's the one funny thing is everyone says, oh, you can't have Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore both be good. But they just completely ignore the Cincinnati Bengals, who have the number 1 Dynasty wide receiver and the number 7 guy on their team, you know. So it's not exactly true. You're just worried about the quarterback at that point, whether it's Joe Flacco or Zach Wilson. So, I just think that it's definitely possible both of these guys can coexist. I think that this might be a little bit more of an Elijah Moore week personally, but no, Garrett Wilson has been pretty good for a rookie. So we will see how he can do. Maybe they'll be able to shake off the Super Bowl hangover eventually. This is a pretty good defense, but it's not been showing it yet. So I like that call. All right, so that's our starts of the week this week, guys. Let us know what you think over on Twitter or on YouTube. Make sure if you're following on YouTube, if you could like, comment, subscribe to the video, just put a comment out there. Helps with the algorithm just to get the podcast flowing and out there to more people. But that said, we're going to jump into a little bit of advice, because one of the biggest things that I've seen, this is probably one of the biggest injuries, because it just leaves people not knowing where to go with this player, and that is Trey Lance. If you missed it He did get basically the Dak Prescott injury from a couple years ago, dislocated his ankle, which basically means he broke it. To what extent, we don't really know. I do know that it can't be as bad as Dak's because he didn't try and bang it back into place. So there's that. But, but yeah, Trey Lance he already had his surgery. He is out for the rest of the year. And this will be his team in 2023. And that leaves everybody just wondering, what the heck do we do with Trey Lance now? A lot of people are freaking out because they're saying, well, if Jimmy Garoppolo comes back, at the end of the year, he is a free agent. They can't franchise tag him. They can't extend, they can extend him, I guess, but if they re-sign him, but essentially they have no tools in their bag because of the restructured contract that they signed. Jimmy Garoppolo has the choice to walk or re-sign with the Niners. It is in his hands. It's not in the team's hands. So nobody really knows, but if he balls out, are they going to bring him back? This is a really good roster. There's a lot of people that think that they're going to make it a deep run in the playoffs, especially in the NFC. So if they do that with Jimmy Garoppolo, where does that leave Trey Lance? And I just want to talk about some of the scenarios here with Dale and get some opinions and feedback into what you should do with Trey Lance in your league. So Dale, first things first, what are your thoughts on Trey Lance? Are you buying, holding, selling? What are you thinking? Go.
All right, for Trey Lance, I am actually pretty scared about Trey Lance. To be honest, I am one of those fantasy owners that is freaking out over Lance, and I'm not really sure what to do with him at the moment. I'm trying to my hope is to have the hype from this year carry over to next year to get something potentially like a first round pick next year, or like another decent quarterback that can actually play this year. So I'm more trying to sell Lance at this moment. I mean, I don't mind holding him, but in the leagues that I do have him in, I don't have a lot of depth at quarterback, unfortunately. So that's more why I'm freaking out over him, because I didn't really sell the farm, but I kind of sold the farm on the hype of Trey Lance and the potential, and we never got to see any of that. That's where I'm either gonna hold. I'm probably gonna end up holding on him because of that, because his value is just gonna keep dipping.
So here's my thoughts on it. And the way that I think the best way to talk about this is to look at the end of year scenarios that that are possible, essentially, right? So scenario number one, the San Francisco 49ers win the Super Bowl or make a deep playoff run, and that's with Jimmy Garoppolo. He plays very, very well. There's two options at that point, right? Either they bring back Jimmy Garoppolo or they let him walk. If they let him walk, it's Trey's team 100%, no loss in value. You're just basically postponing 1 year, essentially, right? If they bring Jimmy Garoppolo back, that means that more than likely they're going to try and trade Trey Lance. And then at that point, it's a free-for-all. You don't know where he's going to go, what he's going to go for, anything like that. If he goes to a team, let's say he goes to the Baltimore Ravens. Let's say they move on from Lamar, he goes to the Ravens. That'd be probably like the second best situation you could possibly ask for. But let's say that he goes to somewhere like the Detroit Lions. We have no idea, right? That is where you could see a pretty big dip in his volume, right? Then you look at someone like the other scenario would be they don't make a playoff run, with Jimmy Garoppolo. In that case, they would 100% let Jimmy Garoppolo walk. They're not going to try and even bring him back at all. And then it's Trey Lance's team. So there's only one situation where they really has an impact negatively on Trey Lance's value, in my opinion. And it's definitely like a 50-50. I mean, it is a good team. But I think that based on everything we've heard from the coaching staff and everything they've said, this is Trey Lance's team. They've committed to him. And the fact that they brought back Jimmy was 100% on the fact that they couldn't get a trade partner worked out, essentially, that they had no other choice. They weren't just going to cut him because he was a quality backup. You didn't know what you were going to get from Trey Lance. And I don't think there's ever really any risk of them sitting Trey Lance for Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think that he was always just there in case something like this happened, because he's a great backup insurance policy for Trey Lance. So I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is gone after this year. So personally, I'm not too worried about Trey Lance long term. It's just more what you're doing with him in the short term. That's my opinion that I'm taking on him. So personally, I'm either holding or I might even be a buyer. It depends on, and that's where I guess we can transition into the advice. So buy, sell, and hold. It's always the classic game that we play with these players, right? Are you a buy, or you sell or hold? Well, it all depends on your situation, right? So if you're a contender, if you think your team is looking good after 2 weeks, you've got guys that are hitting pretty hard so far, you've avoided some of the injury risk, you've avoided some of those guys, but you do have Trey Lance. I would sell him for a player, someone like maybe a Zach Wilson, who's kind of coming back, and maybe a pick or something like that, or, a Kirk Cousins, whatever you could get. I would sell him for a fair value, maybe a little bit of a dip in what he was going for a couple weeks ago, but I am not panicking and selling for nothing. I'm not going to just give him up on the cheap. If you're someone who is kind of in the middle, you're wishy-washy, you don't really know if you're going to be able to compete this year or if you're going to be able to tank it out, like you're not going to make playoffs. If you're kind of in the middle, I'm holding. 100% I'm holding. And if you don't have him, I probably am not going to buy if I'm one of those middle teams, because you need the assets that you're going to have to possibly, if you do make a playoff run, you'll need those assets long term. So I'm holding 100%. If I have him or if I don't have him, I'm not buying him. But if you're a team that is not looking good, you're not looking like you're probably going to get to playoffs, you don't have the talent there, the depth there, I'm 100% holding and I'm 100% buying if I can. Because again, there's a situation where Jimmy Garoppolo comes back and it's his team, but if they don't make Trey Lance something, I'm telling you right now, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan will lose their jobs. It will 100% happen. So they have a personal incentive to make this guy work. So I think that is something that we need to consider. And I think that that's why I'm not too worried about it personally. So what are your thoughts on that?
I do agree with all of that. I do think Trey Lance is their long-term plan in San Francisco. I do expect them to make a playoff run because the NFC is not very deep this year, and I think they're either going to win the division or be a higher wild card team. So they're gonna do well enough this year to make the playoffs and probably make a good run. So, but as for Jimmy G, I as as a Trey Lance owner, I kind of hope this is his last year. But I wouldn't put it past John Lynch to try to bring him back in some capacity because he is a good locker room guy, and the guys like him, and he's a good backup. And I'm not sure where he'll fit in the free agency scheme with all these. So with all these quarterbacks coming in next year, so I'm not sure where he'll go if he goes somewhere, and
Yeah.
be able to start.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's fair. And the one thing with that is, I will say, we always have the deepest league ever, right? But there's a lot of teams that could probably use a Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not a big fan of Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's a solid starter. Like, you look at New Orleans, Jameis is up and down so far there. Carolina, they could use a team or a quarterback there. Houston, he would fit in decently there as a bridge quarterback if they wanted that. You got Indianapolis, they're going to retread the old, we're just going to get a vet guy in here, and there's that. You got someone like Detroit if they wanted to move on from Jared Goff. I don't think that's very likely personally. New England, not very likely there, but there's a few other teams here, man, where I think that he could fit in. Washington, if they pull Jim Irsay, Carson Wentz out of the building. Atlanta, possibly. Seattle, he would still be a good fit in Seattle today. Tampa Bay after Tom Brady retires. I know it's a good quarterback class next year, but there are still quite a few teams. New York Giants, there's another one right there. So I think that there's a lot of possibilities. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more than likely going to walk because I don't think that he wants to be a backup. And I think that the coaching staff has committed to Trey Lance for the future. So that said, last thing we'll touch on, a little bit of advice here. So again, I just gave my opinion on what your scenario is. If you're a contender, sell him, just get the pieces to help you get a title because you're not going to be able to count on him this year. He's out. If you're in that middle range, just hold. If you're not a contender, I'd be buying and trying to get him there. But if you were selling Trey Lance as a contender, what are you possibly giving up right now in a one quarterback or a super flex league? What would your ideal and we'll just do future draft capital, just to make it easier there. You can do your own evaluations on players. I don't want to get into the weeds here too much on that. Like, Zach Wilson in a first and a second and a fourth, like whatever. You can figure out what Zach Wilson is worth in terms of future picks and then assign it that way. So what would you say future pick wise in a one quarterback league for Trey Lance if you're selling? What would you want to get for him?
Honestly, I mean, to be truthful, if I'm in a one quarterback league, and I probably wouldn't even touch Lance because I feel.
Boy, this is your owner, so you're trying to sell him.
Oh, okay. Right. Oh, so I'm trying to sell him. So yeah. If I'm trying to sell him, I would probably want a first out of him.
A late first in 2023.
Yeah. I would probably say like a mid to late first would be fair. It's for Lance because he does have that pedigree. Like he does have that star potential that I wish we would have seen, but so that's probably what I would want.
That's fair. And that's right where I'm at as well in one quarterback. More than likely, you're probably not going to get a mid first for him. So it'd probably have to be a late first, but I think that's right around his value. I think that's kind of where it's fair. You're taking the risk on if you're buying him for a late first, you're getting the risk that he's never going to be able to develop into something. But, there was a lot of rumors that he was 1 year away from being a stud. He needed one more year of development. And again, you look at Aaron Rodgers, he needed 3 years on the bench. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not great either. It's not great. You don't love to see that. But yeah, I think that's pretty fair in terms of his value. What about in a super flex league? Because we all know quarterbacks are a little bit more valuable there. What would you sell him for in that league?
I would So are we talking about like draft capital and only draft capital, or are we talking about like a potential like player pick swap?
I would just do draft capital just to make it easier, one-to-one comparison. So like in a one quarterback, he's worth one first. Are you saying in a super flex, he's worth two firsts, a first and a second, a first and a third?
I'm probably going a first and a second. I don't think he's quite worth first right now. I would probably like to have a 23 first and second, and I would be very, very happy at that point to get off in lane. And
that's where it gets a little tricky here because more than likely you don't know the value of those firsts. If it was a high first, 100%, I'm with you. First and a second would be fine. If it's probably a late first, I'd probably say two firsts at that point. Right. But if it's a mid to early first and then a second, I'd be okay with that. A mid second. But yeah, if you have any suspicion that they're going to be late picks, I'm 100% down for two firsts for Trey Lance because we've all seen it the last couple of years. Oh, these are the deepest classes ever, and then they just fall off a cliff after like
Yep.
6-7 picks. It just never lives up to the billing when it comes to the actual draft time. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your trades. If you think that they're going to be a mid pick, I traded. I will always be burned by this one. Last year, I was in a league trying to rebuild. Sold Elijah Moore to a guy. He wasn't even in playoff contention at the time, so I got his first for him. His team was rough, and then his team just went on a run. He ended up winning the league last year. His team did not lose after I made that Elijah Moore trade. Didn't use Elijah Moore, but his team came on so hard. Ended up giving up basically the Elijah Moore for the 112. And I was like, wasn't bad value. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad, but it's just like, this was supposed to be like the 1-6, Elijah Moore for Drake London is what I was looking at originally. And I was like, that would have been so much better. But it was Elijah Moore for basically, whoever the 112 in a super flex was this year. I think it was someone like George Pickens. It's not bad, but it could have been better. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind when you're looking at trades for Trey Lance, especially in a super flex league. Definitely, again, use that kind of matrix. If you think you're a contender, don't even bother going for him. Sell them if you have them. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Trey Lance. Just wanted to give a little bit of insight into it because the thoughts on this are just all over the board, man. People are freaking out, and I get it, but at the same time, we got to be. This is where the engineering side of me is a little bit better. I get to be a little bit more calm under the stress, I guess. So you got to think through things a little bit more logically. Eventually, things will calm down. I mean, look at Dak Prescott a couple years ago. Now, I know Dak had the pedigree of being a good quarterback, right? But he went from the quarterback number 5 overall from having before the ankle injury that year to the quarterback number 6 the next season. So, he really didn't drop that far down the boards. Again, he had a little bit more history at that point in time. So, a little bit more to build off of. But Trey Lance was a top 12 guy 2 weeks ago. He was a top 12 Dynasty quarterback 2 weeks ago. What is he going to drop to? 15, 16? He's not dropping out of the top 20. I can tell you that, especially if they get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. So let's just go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think the biggest thing that Lance will have to worry about is his confidence in cutting and just running in general, because that's a huge part of his game compared to Dak, where like that was part of his game, but that wasn't the main focal point. Yeah. So like that's gonna be the big thing for Lance, is just getting confident and comfortable running again and being tackled and being
the one
in
Well, I was gonna say the one nice thing with this injury is it's a broken bone, which are super rare in general, which is kind of funny for NFL football, right? They don't really break their bones too often. But the nice thing about a break is typically, as long as there's not a ton of ligament damage, it's 6 weeks out and then you're back to recovery. Now, he's going to be back in recovering and practicing. This is week 2. He's going to have almost a full year to get healthy from a 6-week, like a 2-month injury. He will be just fine next year, start of training camp. So I am not worried about that whatsoever. They've already confirmed that the surgery was a success. It looks like, he had. It's too early to know if he's going to get an infection or something like that, something like the Darius Geis injury a couple years ago. But it's very unlikely that he's going to have an infection at this point in time if everything is looking up for him. So I just think that he's going to be just fine. In 2 months, he's going to be practicing again, more than not practicing, but he's going to be recovering and rehabbing that, and he'll be just fine by the start of next year. So again, we got to think through this thing a little bit more logically, not so emotional. I know it sucks. Trust me, it sucks. I have him in half of my dynasty leagues, over half of my dynasty leagues. So it does definitely suck, but let's just be calm with it and just, use that matrix that I talked about earlier for where you stand in your leagues, and we can go from there. So, all right, enough talk. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I agree on that. It's really important in fantasy football to be rational and to not just trade on emotion.
Yes, it's crazy. Someone sent me an offer of basically basically Trey Lance and Traylon Burks for Kirk Cousins. I was like, dude, what is this? Like, get out of here, man. No, no. So, yeah, people are trying to take advantage of it. So, yeah, just be careful out there if you have him in your league. So, all right, enough talk about Trey Lance. Sucks enough. I don't want to keep living in this emotion as we're talking, but we're going to recap week number 2 for the ERI Dynasty League now, and this is where I get to also dwell in my sadness of being 0-2 in this league. Back-to-back worst manager based on the sleeper rankings. Like, thank you, sleeper. I appreciate you. My team has been below expectation twice in a row. Oh, goodness, man. That's frustrating. It is frustrating. So I guess we'll just kick it off right there. So if you're coming back, there was a pretty tough set of matchups in week number 1. I got a little unlucky, played the second highest scorer. I got a little unlucky and played the second highest scorer yet again, but this week I was the lowest scorer. So we'll touch on that one first. Justin Fields, he had a second touchdown. I will stand by that.
I agree.
Didn't live up to his potential this week. DeAndre Swift had an average week. He was just okay. Saquon Barkley had an average week, was just okay. Both of those guys long-term, though, I do love them. CeeDee Lamb for me, he did pretty good. I love to see the 11 targets in back-to-back weeks. 7 for 75, so he's kind of getting back there. No touchdowns yet, but again, it's coming. Allen Robinson was good. Talked about it earlier. Should have had another touchdown, but we'll let that slide. It probably wouldn't have mattered when you hear the other side here. Kyle Pitts for me, he is what he is right now. AJ Dillon was just kind of a victim of circumstance. Aaron Jones just ate everything that game. So
dominated that game.
Oh my gosh. I do like AJ Dillon, but and that's the other thing we'll touch on real quick. We'll touch on this matchup, and then we'll touch on a little bit of trade news in this league. Leonard Fournette, that was a gritty game. Like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
At the end of the third quarter, it was what, 3-0? Like, what in the world?
I think it was 3-3 or something like that.
Like, that was just back and forth.
It was rough.
These teams hate each other, by the way. They just absolutely hate each other.
Absolutely.
And it's not getting better. Evan McPherson was the highest kicker on the week, so I did have that going for me. But Green Bay defense, they were solid. They weren't anything special, but nobody cares about them. But yeah, it kills me because I didn't start Baker Mayfield over Justin Fields. Oh man, sorry, sleeper. I apologize. But then didn't start Rashad Bateman over Allen Robinson, AJ Dillon. I understand it, but I just thought that there was too much risk. Miami's defense is looking pretty good. Dallas Goedert over Kyle Pitts, or Irv Smith over Dallas Goedert. Sorry, I didn't play either one of those over Kyle Pitts. I apologize, sleeper. So, I'm blowing, I'm screwing up here, but yeah, just a rough matchup for me this week. Losing Trey Lance. At least I didn't start him and get 2 points, but yeah, I'm definitely banged up in my wide receiver core. I've got Keenan Allen not playing. Devontae Parker had a goose egg on the bench, luckily, but Gabe Davis ended up being a late inactive. So I had to pivot from him to AJ Dillon pretty late. Chris Godwin was someone that's still getting back healthy. So I just really need some help at wide receiver, but I think they are coming eventually. But on the other side here, Justin Herbert, Melvin Gordon, Darrell Henderson. Justin Herbert had a great night last Thursday. Darrell Henderson was solid, had a touchdown. Love to see Cam Akers showing up a little bit more in that game. What are your thoughts about him in that game?
I was very happy to see Akers on the field for more than 3 snaps.
It was 5. It was 5 in week 1. Come on.
Oh, it was 3 touches, 5 snaps.
Yeah,
but,
you're right.
He was more active. Like I think he's gonna start taking over that lead role over Henderson. Personally, because I don't think Sean McVay trusts Henderson that much. So I think it's gonna be more of a 60-40, probably Akers, Henderson more towards the end of the year. I hope.
Yeah, we're hoping for sure. Yeah. Another highly owned player is Cam Akers for me. So it's not been a great year for me to start the season. I'll tell you that. Drake London for him, he just absolutely blew it up. Oh my gosh, I love Drake London. He's one of my favorite. He was my wide receiver 1 in this class, and definitely showing up. at the detriment of Kyle Pitts a little bit, but I think you can make both these guys good. Come on, let's do it.
I think they definitely can. Like it's just Marcus Mariota and his limitations is the biggest thing. So
To be fair,
yeah.
they were against the Rams though. I mean, that's a tough matchup.
It is tough, but like the Bills showed last week that they can be exploited.
Well, the Bills have a good defense. That's a problem.
I know that, but the Rams defense isn't as good as it was last year. Like they had Von Miller at the end of the year.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of other pieces.
It's still a good defense, though. Compared to the Atlanta Falcons, Falcons were able to keep it up in this game, though. So you just want to see a little bit more from both, I think. But no, Drake London is looking really good through 2 weeks.
Fantastic.
Yeah, love him. He had a Mon-Ra. Sun God, I flew too close. He burned me. He burned the ever-loving hell out of me. 2 carries for 68 yards, 9 catches for 116 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, again, DJ Chark could have had one of those touchdowns, maybe 2 of them. Yeah, so close. But, yeah, just whooped me there. Jahan Dotson in his flex whooped me there. DK Metcalf had a pretty bad day yet again. I'm a little nervous about DK for the rest of the season. Long term, I think he's fine, but Tyler Higbee, 7 for 71. Like, come on, man. I couldn't even get a break from Tyler Higbee. Come on. But, no, it was a good matchup for him, and he was just killing it. I mean, Jared Goff was his best quarterback on his bench. Like, goodness gracious. But, yeah, Damian Harris on the bench. Tony Pollard went off in this game. And this is a guy that's trying to rebuild for the future. So, that's pretty terrifying. So, those wide receivers are definitely looking good for Rob. Moves Rob to 2-0 for a rebuilding team. That's not too bad. Now, we'll see when the depth gets here if he has it for the bye weeks and everything like that. But yeah, that's where it can get a little hairy. I think I have a little bit of an edge in that department for the rest of the league, for most of the league, because of my depth. But yeah, it's going to get interesting here in the next couple of weeks. So puts me at 0-2 and him at 2-0. And after this game, and this is where we'll touch on some trade stuff, I decided that enough was enough and that I needed a quarterback. And I went through so many trade scenarios yesterday with you for most of them, but
yes.
I almost thought about blowing up my team. I went the full range of emotions in 24 hours there. But ultimately I settled on getting Dak Prescott, who is currently injured, from Ryan, division by 0, because he has a lot of elite quarterbacks, Murray, Dak Prescott, and Jalen Hurts. So Dak was his third quarterback. Ended up giving him A.J. Dillon for Dak Prescott. So I don't love it. I did get Sony Michel back in the trade too. He comes home after all these years, but it does leave me a little bit weaker at running back than I like personally. I still have Swift, I still have Barkley, and I have Fournette. So I do have some guys. I really like them. But after that, it's Gainwell, it's Sony Michel, and Chuba Hubbard. So it gets real thin real quick. So any injuries, and I might be absolutely toasted for the year, but I think that I have the wide receiver depth to kind of make up for it in the flex. So I had to get a quarterback. What do you think of that trade?
I do like it. I mean, it does stink that you had to give up A.J. Dillon, but overall, I think that's a pretty fair trade. And you were needing a quarterback really bad, and I think Dak's going to be healthy here in a couple weeks, and I think he's going to set you up better. But for your depth at running back, you may need to make another trade potentially to try to help that out.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's nothing on the waivers basically, so yeah, we'll see. The problem with the running backs in this league specifically is they're so highly concentrated on 4 rosters, so it's pretty rough. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. And again, my biggest problem is, and again, I went through the whole range of trades and emotions and everything, but essentially, I have a first-round pick next year. I can probably get another first or 2 in next year's draft class if I really want to. There's some good running backs that are coming next year. But my problem right now is the wide receivers are absolutely killing me. Now, I should be starting Rashad Bateman. He would have been helping me the last couple of weeks, but, it's just, CeeDee Lamb is not where I thought he would be. Once upon a time, I just had so many elite wide receivers. Keenan Allen just being injured, Chris Godwin being injured. It's just, haven't been able to get that elite production from them there. I'm hoping Gabe Davis is somebody that can kind of step up into that role. Based on Buffalo, that might be something realistic, but my gosh, that Buffalo offense is nasty. But I just need that next set of guys to take a step forward, and then I can maybe neglect my running backs a little bit more here, especially with Kyle Pitts at tight end. Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goedert, I'm so locked there for the next couple of years. I just really need those. The quarterback is the biggest thing, and then some wide receivers to pick up some of the slack here. But we'll see how it goes. Had to make that trade for a quarterback. After losing Trey Lance, too, it was just sitting there with no Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Baker Mayfield was a very dire situation for this season. So, all right. So we'll get back into the recaps. The next game was a heavy hitter slugfest, was actually Ryan versus Dan. Dan is now, oh my gosh, lighting the league on fire, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Ryan gave it his best shot, but his team just was not able to keep up. Jalen Hurts put up 34. Still wasn't enough. Ryan lost 195 to 155 and a 40 points. Oh my gosh, man. We'll talk on Dan's team first because this is just ridiculous. Russell Wilson and Jonathan Taylor, first two guys. Bad week. 18 points combined.
Mm-hmm.
McCaffrey, 17 points. He's starting to look a little bit better. Got back there. Stephon Diggs, 45 points.
12
touchdowns.
12 for 148. He went off last. That was just amazing.
Oh my gosh. Then you look at, Cooper Kupp, still being Cooper Kupp. He did get a lucky touchdown. I'll give him that. Take away one of those touchdowns, he would have had only 25 points. Oh, man. Chucks. But TJ Hawkinson, not great. Don't like TJ Hawkinson very much. He's got me really worried. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is basically eating TJ Hawkinson's lunch this year. He's I
agree.
Oh, goodness. Justin Jefferson had a down week for him. 10 points. But then Tyreek Hill, 43 points. Oh, my gosh. He had 112 points from 3 players, 3 wide receivers. That's nuts, man. Justin Tucker, San Francisco defense. So, it was a good week for Dan there. Oh, gosh. He had James Robinson go off on his bench, outscored Jonathan Taylor. What an idiot. Didn't play him. But I will say that, and I did talk about this with Dan a little bit this week, and you can let me know what your thoughts are on this. But the one thing is, because when I was going through the whole gamut of emotions on my team and whether I could compete with this, and clearly I cannot when you get 3 players putting up 120 points, but essentially what I was looking at was right now, Dan's quarterbacks are vulnerable. They're very, very weak, in my opinion. He's got Aaron Rodgers, who has not been very good this year. He might actually be stepping down. Like, I know Tom Brady warps everyone's mind. He's 45 and still playing, but Aaron Rodgers is 38. That's usually when quarterbacks started to fall off a cliff. Look at Matt Ryan.
I do agree with that, but also Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the talent around him.
That's true.
That is true. I feel that's a big part of it.
That's fair, but for fantasy, he's not been performing very well so far.
Agreed.
Russell Wilson, don't know what the heck is going on in Denver, but he's been terrible through 2 weeks. He's terrible.
He's been atrocious. He is cooking up like a school lunch right now. that is not tasty. It is not good, and we don't want it.
He was decent week 1 against Seattle. He had 19 points in that week, but still, that's just not Russ. That's not what you wanted from Russ, right? The one nice thing is he does have Deshaun Watson on his bench, but we don't know what we're going to get from Watson. So he's on hype. The whole Trey Lance thing, he hasn't played in 2 years, but Neither is Watson. By the time he plays, it'll be basically 2 years since he's played his last game of football. So that's a little interesting there. Watson, I still believe in from a fantasy perspective, so he should be fine, but he is a little bit weaker at the quarterback position. And then his running backs, I think that he's got elite guys at the top. Don't get me wrong here. Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, very, very good. But I think that Zeke has fallen off a cliff. Chase Edmonds is not what we thought. Cam Akers is not what we kind of hoped. James Robinson is looking pretty good, but he's doing a lot of that based on touchdowns so far through 2 weeks. He's had 3 total touchdowns through 3 weeks or 2 weeks here. But other than that, he's really got nobody else. And then behind those wide receivers as well, he's got nobody. His next wide receiver after those 4, which are great, don't get me wrong, is Josh Palmer and Darnell Mooney. So depth-wise, he is a little vulnerable, so I will say that. But we'll see how it goes as the team kind of goes on here. You can't complain when you're putting up almost 200 points, Like I'm trying to nitpick his team as much as I can to make myself feel better, but I can only nitpick so much, I guess. But yeah, Ryan's team, like I said, he put up a good effort. Just a down week from some of the guys. Nick Chubb had 33 points. Derrick Henry had 8.5. He's kind of got me a little concerned. He hasn't been the same so far through 2 weeks, but I think that they're just trying to figure out that offense a little bit and get it rolling. But I think here in a couple weeks, I think by the end of the year, it's going to be definitely rolling business as usual for them. Devontae Adams, not a great week. Still had a touchdown, but down. 2 of 7. Ugh.
Yeah, it's for Adams. It was a very weird game because like last week he got 17 or 19 targets.
Yeah.
He was targeted so much, and then like this week, like it seemed like he kind of disappeared against Arizona, which I was very surprised about.
Yeah, Debo down week. Dawson Knox kind of a down week there. Cortland Sutton showed up. DJ Moore is just doing DJ Moore things. It's just Mr. Consistently mediocre.
Yeah, it's just average.
But
best, yeah.
He did have Kyler on his bench, but Jalen Hurts outscored him. That was about it. So he played pretty well. He started the right guys as well. But yeah, again, would have been enough for most of the league, just was not enough. He was the 3rd highest scorer on the week. Lost only to Dan and Rob, but yeah, just a rough matchup there. All right, the next one we'll talk on here. So that does make Ryan 1-1, Dan 2-0 if you're following along here. We'll touch on the standings here in just a minute, and we're going to try and speed this up. I did see we're over an hour, so we're going to try and pick it up a little bit more here as we go along. The next matchup, the other one that was kind of interesting, Rick Speedway Ale versus Braden, who's also known as just B. B picked up the victory. Narrow victory, less than a point difference.
Barely.
Yeah. But that does make Braden 2-0 and Rick 0-2. So 122 to 121. Yeah, it was a very close one there. But again, we talked on this last week. For Rick specifically, it's not something you want to see when you're going all in for this season. Now, Derek Carr was decent. Najee Harris got me a little concerned. Dalvin Cook definitely has me a little concerned going forward. Mike Evans, not a great week. That was a sloppy game like we talked about. And now he's suspended for a game. That doesn't help here either when you're trying to win, pick up wins everywhere you can. Hunter Renfrow, really unfortunate double back-to-back fumbles. Really kind of tanked his points.
Yeah, and yeah, I was about to say, going on points, like if Renfrow wouldn't have fumbled, Rick would have won.
Yeah, that's great, dude. That's crazy. Back-to-back fumbles cost him the week. That's hilarious. Gerald Everett was a good play. I do like that. I think that he's going to be sneaky good this whole season.
Yes,
David Montgomery, pretty good. 15 carries for 122 yards. The problem is they just the Bears need to get this offense rolling through the air. They have to. Javonte was pretty good, no touchdown, but he's just not getting a ton of usage in the air. But this whole Broncos team is just kind of sloppy right now. Buffalo defense, 19 points there. That's pretty good.
Solid.
But yeah, and then you look at it too, just not a lot of awesomeness on the bench either. It was just kind of a rough week. The funny thing is the Buffalo D isn't even his best defense. Tampa Bay outscored him, so that's just funny. But yeah, rough week for Rick there. Almost pulled up the win. Braden, he started Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon. The Super Bowl hangover, we talked about it. Pretty rough. Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler, 9 of 10 through the air. Do like that, but his efficiency has been rough so far. Jerry Jeudy got injured in that game, left early. It sounds like he's going to be okay, but he's kind of just dealing with it game to game. Christian Kirk, you talked on earlier. Really like him. He's been looking really good. They're really featuring him pretty heavily in this offense. Travis Kelce down week there. Kareem Hunt down week there compared to last week. Kareem Hunt, 23-9. Like, that's a pretty big drop. Well, again, I talked on earlier, all running back scoring was down pretty heavily this week. Mark Andrews, great week there. I love Mark Andrews so much. But yeah, Colts defense got wrecked for Braden. 1 point, 24 points allowed. No sacks, nothing. Just got whooped by Jacksonville. Oh, man. That's rough. And then you look at his bench, wasn't anything crazy. Chris Olave was kind of good. The Rams defense, ultimately, I'm surprised he didn't start the Rams defense, how they've been playing against Atlanta at least. But yeah, rough game for Braden. He had a lot of down players this week, and he still managed to get the win. So congrats to him there. Next matchup we'll touch on here, James versus Ken. Ken is rebuilding, so he didn't really need to win, but he would have won against me, so there's that. But yeah, James gets the victory, puts Ken at 0-2, 153-132. James is now 2-0, beat me in week 1. Quarterbacks here, we got Mahomes versus Stafford. Stafford was a good play there, but he did have Tua on his bench. I think if he would have started Tua, he probably would have won. Yeah, he would have. Yeah. So that's fun. But, it is what it is. You can't blame him too much for that. Mahomes, Aaron Jones showed up insane.
Went off, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Clyde, pretty solid yet again. Do like to see that from Clyde. Yep. Dude, where has he been this whole year? Jamar Chase had a down game too, by the way. 10 points for Jamar Chase. The down game. Crazy. Michael Thomas is looking again like old Michael Thomas. He's got the touchdowns. He's got 3 touchdowns in 2 games. That's crazy. Because old Michael Thomas didn't used to score touchdowns, but his stat line is just so hilariously Michael Thomas. 5 for 57 in week 1, 6 for 65 in week 2. Just 10-yard average. There you go. That's what Michael Thomas does.
Love it. Yeah. Love it.
Pat Freiermuth, he was solid. Deontay Johnson, decent, not great. This whole Pittsburgh offense kind of has me nervous. It kind of just sucks. T. Higgins showed up. It's always so weird having T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I'm not gonna lie, just feels weird. I don't like it, but it works for him, I guess. So there you go. On his bench, Mariota, not a ton. Curtis Samuel on his bench is pretty good. Yeah, you're gonna have to start finding ways to play him. Garrett Wilson on his bench as well. Evan Ingram, so his bench was pretty solid as well. So pretty good week. James is looking pretty solid as we go into the next couple weeks. On the other side, Ken, again, if he would have started Tua over Matt Stafford, would have won. Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, not great from his running backs, but those guys are getting more. They're young. They're young, so give them some time before we judge them too much. Adam Thielen, again, whatever. I don't like Adam Thielen. I know you do, but yeah, he would have gotten a touchdown. Maybe it would have helped him a little bit. Right. Dalton Schultz got injured. That doesn't help him there. Jalen Waddle, 41 points. Love to see that. Whew, love it. Him and Tyreek, man. That is nasty.
Yes, no, I agree, and I am very excited as a Miami fan seeing Waddle and Hill trying to go deep with Tua, like if he can.
He doesn't have the best arm, but it's funny. I real quick in a quick tangent here. Someone flipped all of Tua's throws from, because he's left-handed, right? They mirrored it to make it look like he was throwing right-handed. And it is crazy the perception that does in your brain. Like when it looks like he's throwing right-handed, it looks like he's throwing normal. He looks like a decent thrower. He doesn't look like he has the best arm. He looks like he has basically Case Keenum's arm, but he looks like a good thrower. It's just when he throws left-handed, your brain just does not compute it very well. It just looks so ugly. But no, it's pretty good. Miles Sanders for Ken. Alan Lazard working his way back from injury. I think that he's going to be better as time goes on here. But yeah, and then again, you talk on the bench there. Just Tua was the big miss on the week. But other than that, pretty good lineup starts from Ken. All right, so then the next one here we'll touch on, that's the last one for the week, was Eric versus Keelan. No pun intended, versus Mr. Celia Gurley. He got the close win there to end up going 1-1, 138 to 134. Keelan is now 0-2. He's still probably outscoring me so far on the year. My team has just been atrocious, but yeah, it's been bad, man. But Keelan had Lamar Jackson put up 45 and still lost. That's crazy. The problem here is here, I'll say it right now, Cordero Patterson and Jeff Wilson as his running backs. Jeff Wilson was decent. I'll give him that. A.J. Brown had a little bit of a quiet week, 12 points, but love him so much. Terry McLaurin had a quieter week, but 12 points. His time is coming, I'm telling you. Zach Ertz, decent week there for Zach Ertz. Mark Ingram and Devin Duvernay in his flex. And you look at the bench here, and that's where Tyler Lockett going off. Can't really predict that one. That whole offense is kind of rough right now, so I don't blame him that much on there. So that's really the only big miss. But yeah, the depth is the biggest problem for Keelan, I think, right now in the league. So in time, I think it's going to be coming, but as of right now, it's kind of rough. On the other side, though, we got Josh Allen putting up 30 for Eric. James Conner got injured in that one. He was looking decent until he got that ankle injury. Antonio Gibson continues to be solid so far. We'll see what happens when they bring in Brian Robinson, because it should be about 2 more weeks until he's probably on the field starting. I think he's practicing right now. He's in the facility. So it's going to be a couple weeks before he's activated, and that'll be interesting to see the shakeup of this offense at that point. Mike Williams played last Thursday. Great week. Great bounce back. Brandon Cooks was solid, not great. 10 targets. You'll love to see that, though. He's the number one for Houston. There's really nothing to say there. He'll have his good weeks and his down weeks. Ayuk was better with Jimmy Garoppolo, so there's that. Darren Waller, solid week for Darren Waller. Love to see that. Josh Jacobs, kind of a down week there, and that was pretty much it there. But yeah, Carson Wentz almost outscored Josh Allen. That's crazy how close I was for him. Amari Cooper on the bench for Eric would have definitely made a difference here. Missed on that one, but I don't blame him. I sat Amari Cooper as well after his week 1 performance, but I think that looking back, I think that the Carolina Panthers defense is better than we are giving it credit. So I can understand that. I think that that was a big miss by myself in the league as well. So don't blame him at all for that. So after 2 weeks, that leaves our standings as following. In first place is Dan Brinsfield. He is just absolutely slaughtering the rest of the competition. He's 80 points ahead of second place right now through 2 weeks. 80 points, man. Oh, my gosh. All right, second place is James, 2-0. Third place is Rob, the rebuilder, and he's pretty close to third. Fourth is Braden at 2-0 as well. Ryan is in fifth place, 1-1. Eric in sixth place at 1-1. And then the rest of us are all 0-2, with Keelan at 7th, myself at 8th, Ken at 9th, and Rick in 10th place. And barely, if you did see the points, the separation between myself and Rick is 2 points. So it's very close to all of us being the bottom team here. But it's 0.02 points between Rick and Ken right now for last place. So that's pretty close there. So no, it's just interesting matchups going forward. Any thoughts on the league before we wrap this thing up?
I think the big thing is that Dan is just above and beyond the best team, and he's going to kill you guys each week, and it's going to be interesting to see if somebody can take down Goliath.
Yeah, it's my turn this week, so yep, that's gonna be great. So I'm gonna be starting 0-3. So right. There's that. That's why I was having the whole roller coaster of emotions, because I knew I was playing Dan this week, and oh
god.
Yep. So it's gonna be rough. I'm gonna be very sad. I know I'm gonna be 0-3, and I'm already like upset about it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we'll recap next week. I think next week I'll have a better chance. I'll be playing Eric. It still Eric's outperforming me, so I can't complain too much there. But it's at least closer. It's he's only beat me by 30 instead of double my score already. So there's that.
Yes.
But yeah, it's gonna be a rough one this week. So I really need all my guys to show up this week. Just one amazing week, please. That's all I'm asking. I just want to beat. And the one funny thing is, last tangent here, with all the trades up and downs and everything, Dan was actually trying to get Kyle Pitts from me hard, and I almost traded him to him. But I was going to make a contingent that if I traded him Kyle Pitts, he could not start him against me this week, because if he blew up against me, I would lose my mind. Ended up not doing it. I kept Kyle Pitts, but I was this close to just giving him Kyle Pitts because it was a good offer. I'll say that much. But yeah, I was like, dude, I cannot mentally handle it if he destroys me this week. I just can't handle it. So, oh man, work leagues are fun, man. This one tilts me off the face of the earth. I hate losing in this league, and I'm 0-2. I'm gonna be 0-3. So there's that. So, oh well. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our starts of the week this week. Let us know your thoughts over on Twitter, over on the YouTube, and thanks for hanging in with us. If you made it this far, it was a little bit longer, but we added the Trey Lance talk in the middle there that added a little bit of time. Hopefully, he was able to give you a little bit of insight on what to do with him in your leagues. But yeah, let us know your thoughts over on the socials, on the YouTubes, wherever you listen to the podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Dale, we'll see you next week.